All right, here we are. We are going to create a mobile UI, and yeah, let's get to it. So I'm filming this right now, clearly before the Create Mobile UI project is completed, so you're going to get to see a draft of it. This is what it looks right now. There's no video, that's what we're doing right now, and there's not a lot of content here, but we do have some starting code that we're going to use in this guided project. And you can use it, you cannot use it. That's totally up to you. That's what these guided projects are about, is you going whatever path you think it works best for you. And above all else, just getting more practice, getting more repetitions, writing more code, and getting used to all of this new stuff. So let's get going. I'm gonna go ahead and copy all of this code here, and I'm gonna open up the sandbox. Well, actually, before I open up the sandbox, I have another sandbox open up that I want to show you. So this is actually a whole bunch of code that we're going to get into. I'll close out some of that, not to be distracting. And I just wanted to show this UI here. This is what we're going to be building. We have what looks a lot like a mobile UI. It's fairly simple. It clearly doesn't look exactly like mobile UIs look, but I want to draw your attention to a few specific things. So we have 3 sections here. There's this sort of heading area up here. It's got the name of the page we're on and a back button. None of these actually go anywhere. There's no navigation, but this is largely a CSS and HTML project. So I want you to get used to the idea of building an actual UI that you might ship for a company or a client or yourself if you're building a product. And then inside that, we've got this large general area that we could just call content. And then we have the navigation or the footer, whatever you want to call it. So three sections here. And within that content section, there's a lot of other stuff going on. We've got the image, there's this little price up here, there's the title again, we've got a button, and there's some content down there. So clearing that out again, what I want to draw your attention to and why I mentioned the 3 sections is that this is an example of a layout. You'll notice that only this middle part here scrolls, and the bottom and the top just stay the way they are. They are completely fixed, while this middle section can change. Also, if we make this wider or more slim, you'll see that the layout doesn't look great when you go really slim, but it generally can respond to changes in the screen width. And so this is more of building layouts based on constraints. It's fairly simple to get the layout you want if you hard code everything in pixels. But when you're building layouts these days, modern layouts are often based more around constraints than any specific pixel value, because there are all sorts of screen sizes. There's mobile and there's desktop, and within mobile and desktop, you have all sorts of different mobile devices. On a desktop, you have all sorts of screen sizes, and within any given desktop, anyone can resize their window to be any width or height that they want. So if you want layouts that look good on different screens and different devices in the hands of different people, you'll want to think about constraints more than thinking about one specific UI that you're going for. So that's what we're going to talk about here, especially this idea of having some elements fixed, some elements scrollable, or then getting wider and smaller, and this idea of, you'll see down here that we've told all of these buttons to be roughly equidistant apart. The layout distributes the space as it gains more space. So with that in mind, with this as our UI, let's jump back in to the workspace, and we're going to go to a new, fresh sandbox. Make sure you've got HTML and CSS selected as the sandbox type, and let's get going. I'm going to go ahead and paste in that code. This is the starter code. You'll see over here we've got some icons here. We've got the back button. And the reason I laid this out is because before we get into adding what you might call more realistic icons or more designed icons, we can just go ahead and use emoji. And you'll see You see, that's what, if I can zoom in, I'm going to zoom in over there and go over there. So you'll see here we've got the shopping bag, here we've got the shopping cart, we've got a magnifying glass, and we've got this, which is, I think, named dials. That's the idea, just some emoji that we can use for icons. And you also see that we have the I HTML element here. I does not stand for icon. It's usually italic, but it's often used in place of icon because it's an I. It generally makes sense. And a lot of people probably think it actually stands for icon, which is totally understandable. That's the way it's usually used. So with that in mind, let's go forward and let's build this out into that mobile layout you saw earlier. The first thing I'm going to do here, because I'm working on a zoomed in screen over here, I'm going to go ahead and I want to take, you can check out what I called phone here. We have a phone class on the div that we have at the top. If we collapse that div, you'll see that everything is inside this phone div, and that's this frame that we have on the outside here. But it is a bit tall for the zoomed in screen, so if I take that down to 600, yeah, that looks better. That fits. We can work entirely in this one screen, fairly small, but this is attempting to imitate a mobile layout, so that is just fine. I mentioned before we're going to have our 3 sections, and we're going to look at Flexbox and how we can use Flexbox to give us that layout where we have a top section that doesn't move and a bottom section that also doesn't move, but then a middle section that allows us to, so it'll be, we'll rope off these 2 sections, and then everything in between will be all of our content, and it can be as tall as needed. In here we'll write whatever content. This is going to pretend to be some sort of product page, and so we'll write some copy for our product and put it in there. So I'm gonna just build out that basic skeleton. You'll see that, let's collapse some things, collapse. So we have this, can go ahead and remove that. That's a utility class we might use later. So we have title bar, we have content, and we have footer nav, all inside our phone here. So to start, let's start with the basic layout. I often find when building a layout, it's easiest, or it saves the most headache, if you just start with something pretty basic, the larger idea of your layout, and then get more fine-grained from there. So the first thing that we're going to want to do, I mentioned the Flexbox. We are going to want to use Flexbox, and we're going to start out with phone. We're going to say display flex, and of course that did do a little something there. You'll see that it moved everything into horizontal alignment. And before we go forward, actually, I think we might as well say title bar, give it a background, salmon. Nice. We can see exactly where title bar is right now. We'll do the same for content, background of thistle. And so content, you'll see that doesn't appear anywhere. That's because content doesn't have anything. But if we add something there, you'll see that content does appear. It's there. It's in the DOM. And the last one is footer nav. We'll give it a background of, we haven't used tomato yet, so tomato it is. All right, now you can see where things stand so far. I often use this if I'm wondering what a layout is doing. Then you can just give background colors to actually see where the browser is putting elements and how it's stretching them. Because if everything has a transparent or white background, it's not very obvious what's going on. All right, so clearly this is not anything like what we want so far. Again, let's take off flex. We'll see what happens. We actually have something that looks much more promising without the flex, which is everything is stacked on top of each other, but we add display flex, and that is putting everything in horizontal alignment. That is because row, by default, when you use Flexbox, it's going to put everything in a row. So that's not what we want. We actually want column. Everything to be in a column. And now you may be thinking, well, that's great. You just brought us back to exactly what we had before. There's nothing different here. And you're right, but now that this is display flex as opposed to display block, the default, we can do some different and some more interesting things. So for starters, let's look at content. And remember, content down here, content is inside of phone. Phone has display flex. And so it's in this div content is in a flex container. It's in another element that has display flex, or to put another way, its parent has display flex set, which means we can tell it to flex. So let's go ahead and do that. And look at that. This is already looking much more like the layout we want. We told content to flex 1 and 100. And when you see this, when you see flex 1, 100, we're telling our element to flex 1-to-1, that's this guy, 1-to-1 with its neighbors, its siblings, in this case title bar and footer nav, if they're also flexing. So we can, and the second part is saying take up 100% of the space available to you. So if we go down here, we can say flex, and you'll go flex 1, and you will get flex 1. We need that. So we need the 100%. Okay, so if we go ahead and add this to all of them, you'll see they're all trying to take up 100%, but because they're all doing it together and they're all flexing, they end up taking up equal space each. So that's great, but we actually don't. We want to remove that. We want to remove this one. We only want the middle content to flex. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to tell each of these, the title bar and the footer nav, to just have a height. And the height we're going to use, look at the notes for this lesson, is 80 pixels. So we can come in here and say height 80 pixels. All right. And come up here, same thing, height 80 pixels. So now we have these two, both with height 80 pixels. That's great. And you'll see already that we have 80 pixels repeated here twice. So what we can do, what you saw me delete at the beginning because I haven't removed it yet, is we can add a utility class or a shared class that's gonna apply styles to both of these. So we can call it, I'm gonna call it a horizontal nav, and I want that on both. Put it down here as well. And of course, we actually need to do something with it. So put it up here, and we're going to take that height, and we're going to move that height up into here. You'll see that our horizontal navs both have the height, and we want to remove that. Okay, great. Now we have this up here. We have horizontal nav, which is going to apply styles to both of them. So now let's look at something else we have going on here. Let's look at the footer first. We have all of these buttons, and we want them to be centered vertically and to be sort of flexible horizontally. We want them to space themselves out nicely. So just to make that clear, we want them to go, maybe there and there and there and there. Each of these will be a button. So Flexbox can handle that for us as well. We want to add that to the footer nav. So let's say display flex, our favorite. See that we already have some interesting things going on. We have the buttons all taking up 100% of the height. And then beyond that, we want to say flex, not flex direction. We want to say justify content center. And now we have everything in the center, and we want to, well, actually, hold on, let's get line items in there. Items, center, there, everything's nicely in the center. And actually, you'll see that we can, for now, let's just remove that, or let's keep it in there as a comment, because without align items, we're actually getting a full height here, which is nice. And the justify content, instead of center, let's do space between And there you see everything's pushed out. We get the maximum amount of space in between every element. But then actually what we really want, at least for the layout at hand, is space around. So this will give us, if we grow and shrink, you'll see that the space between these buttons will grow and shrink nicely, which is exactly what we had in the demo. We can jump over here again, and you'll see that those buttons there at the bottom, they'll move nicely back and forth, and the space in between them is growing and shrinking. It's very obvious here because we have the color behind them, but the exact same thing is happening in that other UI. Now going to the title bar, we also want this one to be display flex, and you'll see that our button up here will grow nicely like these buttons did down there. But actually, since this is another one of those styles that is in more than one place, we can just move it up here to display flex to our horizontal nav class that's applied to both, and we'll get it on both. So in order to make this button look nice, we have, what do we want to do to it? Let's say, let's just give it some spacing over to the left. Let's move it away from the edge of this would-be phone. So to do that, let's go to our title bar here, and we will say, we will say title bar button, selecting all buttons inside the title bar, which in this case is only one button. And we're only going to have one button in here based on the design. So this will be fine to just style it at the tag level. And it's going to have margin left, left, left. 10 pixels. Let's go. Let's just say 20. We can adjust this later. This is just a matter of eyeballing it. It's whatever you feel looks nice, or whatever you think goes with your design. Or if you actually have a design that someone else created or you yourself created, you can find an exact value from that. But in this case, we're just going to go with our gut. We're gonna decide that this looks nice. So some other things that you might notice if you go look back at the end design is that all these buttons are in capitals and they're a bit darker, the font. So let's go over here and let's make that happen. I'm gonna go ahead and do this on all buttons across the whole site. And we're gonna say text transform uppercase and font weight bold. Great, that looks much more like the design. And now, in addition to that, we also, this one up here is roughly fine, but the ones down below, we want those icons to be above the text. So in order to do that, we can utilize more display properties, going down to footer nav, and we're gonna do the same thing. We will just take all buttons, footer nav, button, all buttons inside footer nav, and we will say display block for you, or not buttons. We want, there we go. We want all the I tags. We can open up footer nav. Again, you'll see we have I here, we have an I there, and these by default are going to be displayed inline, which is exactly what you saw before. Inline meaning that they will show up in line with other content, or specifically other inline content. And in this case, it's just text. There's actually no, looking back over here, there's no tag around. Yeah, having trouble drawing over here. There's no tag around this text. So that is absolutely going to be inline. And so it's just going to show up right in line with our icons, but we don't want that. We want it on top. This is already looking much better, much closer to the design. And now we can think about the title. So let's go to the title bar, which has a button, and we also want a title in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a div and close it out before I forget. And this will be called product name, or not called, this will have the actual text product name, and the class will be title. There it is. You see it up here in the DOM, it's there. It's looking, if not great, it at least exists. and we are going to style it now to make it look a bit better. So let's go back to the actual design here. What we want is that title, we want it to show up in the center, the horizontal center, no matter the width. And that's different from, if you look down below, you see our buttons, they all space themselves out equally based on the width. But if you look up top, the back button is moving farther and farther away from the center. It's actually fixed relative to the left edge of this phone frame that we created here. But the product title, in this case, cool product, is just sticking around there right in the middle. So this is a good use case for something other than Flexbox. What we're going to do is we're going to use positioning. So going back here, we have product name, we have it up here, there it is, and we want it to be roughly there. We want it roughly right here in the middle, where all these squigglies are. Get rid of that. So let's go and select it. We called it title, give it a class of title, and we want to style it so it's within title bar. Let's go style that. Say title bar. And then title, so everything with the title class within title bar, and we are going to give it a position absolute. You'll notice it jumped up there to the corner, which is not what we want, but we're going to fix that. We're going to say when we use top, left, right, etc. in here, it's going to be relative to the nearest positioned ancestor. So what we want is that we want that nearest positioned ancestor to actually be this frame here. Well, got a little off screen there. This whole frame. Yeah, we're just gonna go with it, these squigglies. We want that to be the nearest positioned ancestor, and right now I don't think it is, but let's just add some styles to be sure. So when you want to center something horizontally, what you can do is you can say from the left, go 50%. And we can also do, we're going to use this trick where, so this 50% is 50% of the parent. Now we also want to say, now after you've moved yourself over 50%, I'm going to draw over here again. So this, where it moved over to is actually 50%, as in the middle, the horizontal middle of this element. But we want the whole thing, not just where it starts, to shift back this way a bit. And we want it to shift back specifically by 50% of its own width. If that sounds a little confusing, just bear with me. We will move it back 50%, and you'll see what I mean. So we're going to use a translate in this context refers to moving something's position. So we're going to translate on the x-axis, so translate x negative 50%. Now look at that. You'll notice that it is right in the middle. It's exactly in the middle, and that's because we moved it. What we did was we first moved it all the way. I'm going to write down here in the middle. So what we first did is we took it and we moved it all the way to the middle. So the middle is roughly there. We moved it all the way over, which moved its left edge all the way to that point. But then we have the whole thing is sort of sticking out over here. And then we told it, now take yourself and move yourself backward. So negative 50% on the x-axis is going to be this direction. Move yourself backward by 50%. The trick is this 50% is 50% of its own width, not the parent itself. Forgot a semicolon there. So when it moves back by that much, it actually ends up perfectly centered horizontally. And what we want now that we have this nice horizontally centered product title, we actually want to move it down. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll remove all those annotations. We want it to come down a little bit to be in the center of this title area. So to do that, we can actually use the exact same trick just on the other axis. we can say now move yourself down. And to move down, we can say move yourself from the top by 50%. 50%, and there it is. It is down 50%. And clearly this is not what we wanted, but that's because it is moving down 50% of the nearest positioned ancestor, the parent element that actually has position assigned to it, which, looking at our code here, I don't think we've assigned position to position. Yeah, it looks like we haven't assigned position to anything else, which means it's using the body. So this is just 50% down the body tag, which is the implicit tag that's all around everything here. Instead of that, though, we can just go to the title bar. We say title bar u position relative. That's misspelled. Relative. And now you'll see that it's using this is what we wanted, despite not being done yet. It's moving down by half of the height. And then we want to translate it again. Translate. This time, different axis. Same idea. Negative 50%. And look at that. That is perfectly centered. And if we update our width here, you'll see that it's doing exactly what we want it to. It's just staying in the middle no matter what. It is constrained to the middle of this title bar element. So before moving on, quick note, we can actually combine these into one by, instead of saying translate x, translate y, just translate, and then it's going to take an x value and a y value, and they're both negative 50%. And you'll see here that we get the exact same outcome. So now we've gotten the footer area and the header area looking fairly decent. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this looks terrible. And you might be thinking that because we have not removed our background colors yet. So before we get started on the content area, the middle area here, let's go ahead and remove these colors. They were very useful, and now I think they might just be getting in our way. So where did we assign those? Let's just look for background. Right. Content, we're going to keep that for now. Then this one, footer nav, we can get rid of. And at the same time as we're getting rid of it, it's still easy to see where the content is because it has that background. But if it didn't, if we take that away, you'll see that it's not clear where one ends and the other begins. So let's go ahead and say border top 1 pixel. It's going to be solid, and it's going to be, let's just say, well, this will be pretty dark. You can change the color later. So 333. Or, right, what am I doing? I've been using named colors this whole time. Let's say gray. Gray it is. So now we have this line that shows us where the footer nav ends, and I'm still going to bring back this color for now. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the title bar. The title bar has this wonderful salmon color, but I'm going to take it away, and I'm going to say border bottom 1 pixel solid, and the same gray. This is gray. Simple color, basic color. All right. So you'll also notice while we're here, you'll see that the title actually has this serifed font. It has, if you've done anything with typography, you've seen this before. It has these little edges to everything, and well, the easiest way to see the difference is to just make it a non-serifed font. And I believe that the system UI font is non-serifed. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to, I'm actually going to apply this to everything. So whenever you want to apply something to everything, well, all the elements within the body anyways, this selector at the top, the box sizing border box, is actually the everything selector. But usually when you want to apply something to quote unquote everything, you'll add it to the body selector. So you can say everything has a color red, and that'll look nice and ugly. But in this case, we want to say everything has a font family of system UI. There we go. That's looking much better. And just to check, if we go back here, we'll see that it looks like we did the same styling. We have the same styling on that title as we do on the buttons. It's just a slightly bigger font, and it's already a bigger font, so I'm not going to change that. What I am going to do is take that styling. Where's title? There it is. We're just going to give it that same text transform, uppercase, and font weight bold. Okay, there we go. We're just going to run with that for now and move on. So now we can really move on to the content now. The content here is looking nice and thistly. The thing that we want to make sure about the content is that it needs to be scrollable. Let's say we're actually building an app for our store or our company, and we're going to have some long product pages. You know, the usual product page with a big sales pitch, telling people to buy, maybe some reviews down below, maybe some other information, maybe just a slew of pictures. There's generally a lot of content on a product page, so we're going to need this to be scrollable. And we don't want it to mess up our footer or our header as it gains lots and lots of content. So let's go ahead and do that. And what I'm going to do, first of all, we can get rid of this hey and replace that hey with a bunch of content. Well, not that much actually, but enough to give us. I have some show notes over here. I'm just going to copy from there and get some. Here's just some p tags. I'm going to format my code to make that look a bit better. So here we have some content. You know, I'm actually just gonna, this is the content that we used over here. You'll see that this is actually the same content we have here, but since we don't yet have that image, I'm just gonna drop this in again. And there we go. Yeah, this is exactly what we need to see. We need to see that when content grows, not everything breaks. And in this case, clearly, everything does break. The layout, that is. So what we need to do is we need to fix that. We want it to be scrollable. And also, notice how up here at the top, we have our lovely, lovely title, or what was formerly our lovely title area, and it has gotten all squished, much smaller, while this massive content area has just expanded to take up as much space as it possibly can and more. So in order to fix this, we need to first go to content, and we're going to tell content what to do when it's content. Maybe I should have named that something else. That's confusing to say out loud. What to do when it's content overflows. Overflow auto. We're just going to say automatically handle it. So now, look at that. And you may be wondering what in the world automatic means in this case. Well, it means, what it is by default is it's visible. So this is where it'll do what you're seeing here. It'll break out of any layouts you have, and it'll show up. And that's fairly sensible, because when you're building a website, if you have content, you generally expect it to be visible to anyone who visits your site. So this is why the web defaults to visible. But it's often not what you want, such as this case. So what we want is, in this case, with this much content, we want actually overflow scroll, which it's scrolling. You'll see that we have the scroll bar. We're on a Mac. Depending on what computer you're on, the scroll bar might be there all the time, as opposed to on Macs, it shows up when you scroll, but otherwise it's just going to disappear like that. But auto, and you know, on a Mac, this is actually going to be you'll see the same. Overflow scroll generally means that you will get those scroll bars, even if you don't need them. But overflow auto is where it'll give you scroll bars if you need them and take them away if you don't. So this is usually what you'll end up using. Although, like I said, on a Mac, because the scroll bars get superimposed on top of other content and disappear when you're not scrolling, it's going to look the same. And if you have an iPhone, you're probably familiar with how this looks over here. So there we go. We have a content area that is scrolling nicely, and that leads us to the actual styling of the content. As I said, we're getting more and more fine-grained as we go. We started at the high level and said we have these three areas. We said we have our title area, we have our footer area, and we have our content area. And having largely taken care of the footer and the header title area, now we need to focus on the content. So let's get some more elements in there. I have some more show notes with some content I can just copy and paste in here, but I'm going to go ahead and let's just live code. Let's try to build this out based on the design, and maybe you'll get something more out of this, because if you are building these out on your own, if you're looking at an image of something or you have some idea in your head and you're building it out, you will have to do more along the lines of what I'm going to do now, live coding this rather than just copying and pasting, because you're going to have to sort of figure out as you go. So let's take a look at this again. We have an image, clearly. We have this image. We have this little price tag here, and judging by where this is, I can already say to myself, that's going to be absolutely positioned. And it's going to need to be positioned relative to the image here. Take that away again. And that's because it's sort of in this weird position. It looks nice as a design, but that's not a usual position for a DOM element. There isn't a layout where you're going to get something just kind of floating off there, slightly down from the top and slightly hovering out over the side. We're going to have to position that ourselves. Moving on, let's look down more. What we have the product title, and I'm just calling it the product title because it is the same here as here. So we would assume those two are linked. And you'll see that the font's different. It's not uppercased. It's just a normal font, but it does look bold. Then we're going to have this buy now button. It wouldn't quite be a product page if you can actually buy anything. That makes sense. And going down more, what else do we have? And so to keep things simple, the rest is just quote unquote content. In other words, it's just a bunch of p tags. And even down there at the bottom, even this is just going to be some bold text, an inline strong tag, or whatever it may be. So these are just going to be a bunch of p tags. This is going to be a button. This will use maybe an H3 or an H something. And going back up, ready for this? Yeah, those annotations don't move. Close them out. And then we're going to have our image and just some sort of this guy again. That I'm just going to say for now, we'll plan to use a div there. So we're going to need a few things. And let's go and build out sort of a skeleton of this. So starting with the image, we're going to completely ignoring everything down below. Ignore. We're going to look just at this image. And we know that we have something over here that needs to show up on top and outside. We're going to need some absolute positioning. So we're going to need some sort of container that it's going to be within. That'll most likely be another div. And we're going to have an image. And so images can't actually have children. You can't put another element inside of an image, which is why we can't create an image. We can't say, make an image, then put this inside the image, and then give it absolute positioning. We're going to need some other element to hold both the image and this thing that's supposed to float out there. So let's go ahead and get that going. This is the example, so I'm going to go back over here to our actual code. I'll close out that search box, and let's go for it. So I went ahead and deleted the extraneous p tags that we had here. Here are the p tags that we have in the example. So we'll just keep those in there. We're going to need some sort of image area. I'm just going to call it a card image. I need a div class card image, and you can name this whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you. There's this concept in a lot of UI programming, UI design, of having cards, quote unquote cards, and there's just a number of things inside of cards, including often images. So I'm going to call this a card image, and inside of it we're going to have that div where we're going to have the price. I'm going to call it price because I think that makes sense. Close it out, div, and we're just going to, since this isn't a live application with actual data that you need to pass in, we're just going to hard code in there 12. 12 is the price of this cool product. And then we're going to have an image, of course. Well, for now, actually, let's hold off on the image, and you'll see why later. So we're going to have our card image, and we have our price. Great. So there you see we have the price hanging out over there. let's go ahead and start styling this. And I'm going to go ahead and style it right here at the bottom because you can see both together, which is nice. So we're going to say the card image, and I'm going to say for now something super visible. Make it have black background. Actually, that's not even visible enough. Green. Let's make it green. We don't have any green. No, lime. There we go. That's visible. And I'm going to give it some styling. So our images, oftentimes images can obviously come in any sort of dimensions that you want. And because you don't always know what the dimensions will be, you often just choose, assign some images, some dimensions that you think are reasonable for your image. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this case. I'm going to say card image. It's already full width. I do want it to be the full width, but I'm going to say card image, you have a height of, let's just say what, 200 pixels? How does that look? That looks fine. I don't remember what it was over here, but actually it looks a little bigger. We'll make it a little bigger. Let's say 3. Yeah, that looks squarish, but remember also that it's meant to expand. It's not necessarily going to be a perfect square. If you want it to be a perfect square, you can do that, but it would take some different styling. And then it would also be getting taller the wider it gets too. So just something to be aware of. When you have images that can get wider with window width, they can often push a bunch of content down because just because someone has a very wide window doesn't mean they necessarily have a very tall window to look at your content. So just something to be aware of. All right, we've got this with height 300, and looking again over here at our example, I see a shadow on this. I see some rounded corners, and I see some padding. So the padding though, I want to particularly call out the padding. We can see it up here. There's that space over here, over there, and here. So you might think, well, let's give this element some padding, and we could. But you also notice we have some padding there, and here. Why? There we go. Over on this side. So there's padding all around. And I'm going to go ahead and erase that. What that means is that we can probably save ourselves some work and make it more consistent by going back to the content and adding the padding here. I'm going to say padding, 10 pixels. Great. I think 20, maybe 20. Yeah, let's go with that. I'm going to say padding 20 pixels. So now we have some padding there. We're going to go back to the card image and let's get that border radius that we saw. Border radius, I'm just going to guess what it was as 10 pixels. We have a border radius now. We can go box shadow. Box shadow, I'm actually going to find that in my show notes, because box shadows are usually not you don't necessarily know how they're going to look until you apply them. So I just copied that over because that's the box shadow I want. Usually you play around with these, you figure out values that you like. It's not always like colors where you can just assign salmon or lime to anything you want. Box shadows, you actually have to configure all these values. So you can look up the specifics of box shadows, but we have some x-axis, some y-axis. I can make that clear. Let's say 10 pixels. You'll see it's down lower. What have we said? 100, way lower, up and down. So 0 means that the box shadow is going to be directly behind. And here we can say 10 as well. We can say 100. We're moving the shadow on the x-axis. You can, of course, move it negatively too. So this is just positioning your shadow. And when you have 0, you don't have to include any units. You can just say 0. This is true of most CSS properties, not just shadows. And here, this 10 pixels is how much it's going to spread out. If we do this, you'll see, well, where is it? It is totally gone. Actually, let's take this up to 9 and bring this back. So there's a much darker shadow. And you'll see now it's taking up a lot of the screen. It may not even be that clear that's a shadow because it's taking up so much space. 50 might be, let's just bring down 40, 30, 20, and 10 where we had it earlier. And I'm going to take the color, so that this whole value here at the end is just the color of the box shadow. We can say black, of course. It just doesn't usually look that good. It's a little dark. It's not subtle enough for the requirements of most UIs. So let's bring that back down. And at this point, we can also take off that, where was that? Here it is. We can take off the color of that content area. And there we go. This is looking better and better. I'm going to leave this as this lime green for now. And now that it's looking a lot more like what we had earlier, let's go ahead and do that price. I think we called it price, just to be sure. Yep, price it is. So Mr. Price over here, we're going to say background crimson, color white. I'm going to do the same thing of what? That's not what I wanted. We could transform it to uppercase, but it's numbers, so it would have no effect. What I want is font weight bold, make it nice and bold. Add a bit of padding here. Let's say 5 pixels and 0. We can revisit this. And we also want it to, so it's taking up the whole width right now. What we want it to do is take up only as much space as it needs. And as soon as we give it position absolute, it's going to do that. Absolute. There we go. So you'll see that it's hanging out up there at the top. And we needed some more. If I put 10 here, is that going to look weird? No, that looks fine. So there's a bit more padding on the left and right than on the top and bottom. And that is exactly what we want in this case. We can also give it the border radius of, do something huge like 100 pixels. And the reason to do something, a large value here, we could do 1,000, we could do 10,000, and it's not going to change because the border radius will only round as much as it can, as much as makes sense for the height and the width of it. So when you have a large value border radius, it just means round yourself basically like a pill. It's just going to be a smooth rounding from on either side. And in this case, if you ever want to make a circle, you can do the same thing, use border radius. You just have to make sure that whatever you're styling has width and height that are the same. If you have a square and you apply a large border radius, it'll give you a circle. But if you have anything that is not a perfect square like this, it was a rectangle earlier, and you can see that by taking away the border radius, then it is going to round those corners, but it's not going to magically give you a circle. So there we go. We have the price that is looking a lot like what we have over here. And now we need to move it. So this is where that positioning absolute comes in. Looking back here, it looks like we want to move it over to the right and down a bit. Down a bit is pretty simple. We can just say top 10 pixels. Oh, there we go. You'll notice it jumped up to the parent that has a positioning applied to it. What we need is we want that card image here. We want it to stick to this thing, so we need to say position relative to that. All right, now it's offset from the top there. You can remove that. And let's say right, 0. What does right 0 give us? Okay, so this is looking pretty decent, pretty similar to what we want. We can then say instead of right 0, we can actually say from the right. So from the right, let's say 20 pixels. That'll move 20 pixels. That'll move it away from the right. This direction. This direction. And we actually want to go in the other direction, so we can say negative 20 pixels and move it off to the side there. Maybe that's a bit much. Let's just try 10. And yeah, that looks fine. That looks fairly similar to what we have over here. Maybe the top was a bit more on that example. Yeah, let's go with that. That looks nice. And so we're getting pretty close here. What we need is down below, we need our button. What else do we need? A title, I think. Yeah, we need a title and a button, and that's going to go in here. Well, the title, I'm going to say an H3. product, and that looks good already. I think I actually just left it as default styling when I made that starter code, or not the starter code, the final code over here. So we'll stick with that, and we need that button. So we need a button, and it is going to say buy. Buy. This is a store. Oh, buy now. Let's say buy now. This is an excited store. This store wants you to buy right now. And I'm actually going to give it a class because it needs some styling to it. This button down here, no one's really wanting to click that. That doesn't look very clickable. Our users might have no idea that they can buy this product. I know, unlikely, but this is just, asking for trouble, asking for less sales because it's not obvious how to purchase your product. So let's make it a bit more obvious. Give it a class of call to action. This, if you're unfamiliar with the term, is just something, this is a way to describe elements on a page that you want the user to pay attention to. You want to get people's attention, and you want them to take an action, such as buying your product. So this is a call to action. You can name it whatever you want, but this is what I'm going to name it. Call to action. And let's say background. Did we use tomato yet? Probably, but we're going to go with it again here. And we're going to say display block and take it all the way max width, all the way across. And what else do we want? Just you could say padding. We could give it 10 pixels padding. That makes it much more visible, and that works great. I just want to point out, since we're here and since we're learning CSS, a different way you could do it, which is line height. Give line height of 30 pixels, say. And as opposed to padding, which is going to give you something above and below the text, line height is actually going to control the height itself. So this whole button now is going to be 30 pixels tall because we gave it a line height of 30. So just another approach that you can consider. And sometimes line height can be particularly useful because, let's go ahead and something that right now you'll notice if I'm over here, my mouse doesn't change when I'm on top of that, but I'm gonna go back here and I will say cursor pointer, which doesn't look like much until you're over here. You'll see that the cursor turns into that little hand that indicates this is a clickable something. And you don't need cursors, but over here in the UI, in the pairwise UI, you'll see we actually use cursor pointer quite a bit too on all these buttons to indicate that they are clickable. But it's not always the case. It's up to you. And you'll notice on a lot of interfaces, say on a Mac or a PC, on a computer rather than on the web, you don't usually get that. You just expect things to be interactive, so you click them. But the web started out and is still largely uninteractive. So that cursor pointer shows us that we can click something. Of course, this is imitating a mobile UI. And on mobile, you get no hover states. You don't get any cursor. You just see something and you click it. So this may be a bit unrealistic for this specific interface, unless you expect people to visit this on their desktop. And maybe you do. But either way, we're learning CSS here. So let's cover as much as we can when it's opportune. So we have the cool product, we have the buy now. I don't remember entirely, but I think I'm not even gonna look at what this looked like, but I think the call to action had border radius. Let's go with 5 pixels. There we go. Rounded corners, but not totally circular. You'd go totally circular too, if you make that much bigger. All up to you. A lot of times if you're building something out and you're not working off of a strict design document, you can do what I'm doing here, which is sort of just design it as you go. You can design it in the browser. You can tweak the CSS until you think it looks good, and that's totally valid. The nice thing about using CSS in this way is if you're someone who enjoys design or enjoys looking at nice products, but you're not necessarily a designer yourself, this is sort of where this has been my experience, is you can build something and just tweak it until you quite like it. A lot of a lot of people, even if they're not, you may not be necessarily a gifted author yourself, but you probably enjoy good literature. So it's much easier to see something you really like than to produce something you really like. And when you're working with CSS and HTML, you can often just iterate and iterate and iterate and change and change and change until you see something that you quite like. So this is one approach to design. And I know what you're thinking as I'm talking about graphic design, that this lime image that's not even an image is just not doing it for me. And that is very fair. So we probably don't want this to have a lime background. But without that, we just have the shadow. So you know what we need is we need an image. We need an image here in this square. What are we going to do? Well, there is a great, so you see here we have a cat. Why do we have a cat? Well, there's a great website called Place Kitten. Place Kitten, placeholder kitten images for developers. Let's check that out. Oh, look at this. What a forward-thinking website. Who knew that we would need placeholder images of kittens? This person did, and they were right. We do need these. So what you can do is you can come here, you can just grab a link, and the way we're going to use, you can use this link the same way you would use any image link. So let's go back here, and we can come into card image. We can say image src equals that. Ooh, that is a kitten. And we'll close it out. And this URL here, you can just change this URL. I'm going to change this to HTTPS. And over here, we can say 300. Let's make it wider. Not quite wide enough. Let's say 400. Yes. As you can probably guess, I use this exact image, the 400 by 300 image, in the example over there. And so this, you'll notice that it's going, look at that. It's kind of giving us some horizontal scroll that we weren't expecting, or that we don't want. That's not part of the design. So what are we going to do here? Well, there are a number of options, but the one that I think makes the most sense in this particular case is, well, to demonstrate real quick, to show some more options. We could go up here, in the card image, we could say overflow hidden. And you'll see, hey, look at that. Our image is nicely cropped, but you'll also quickly see that our price is cropped too. And what overflow hidden will do is it'll chop everything off, but it'll chop everything off. So if you want to be specific, you want to say, well, this element I actually want to show up, and this other element I don't want to show up. Overflow hidden is sort of you're painting with very broad strokes. You might end up cutting off elements that you did not intend to. So rather than do that, take that away. Now we're back to this horizontal scrolling situation. What we can do is, instead of even putting an image tag in here, we can, well, actually let's take this. I want to take this URL, and I want to get rid of that image. And I want to come back up to card image, and I'm going to say you have a background image using a URL. Oh, well, what? That's not right. How did that get out of my clipboard? Let's go back to here. I'm going to recopy that. Okay, so there we go. We have a background image, and you'll see that in this case, if you can ignore for a second the fact that we have this image that is tiling itself, aka repeating itself again and again, other than that, things look generally okay. And we can go ahead and in here we can bring that back up to 4, and look at that. That looks nice. So before moving on and calling this a day, let's go back to this image, and I'll just show you some things that you can do with background images. You can say background repeat, no repeat. Yeah, you would think that this would just be none, right? No, it is no repeat. It's just one of those things that you do not need to remember, but you eventually will, because you will use it so many times. Background repeat, no repeat, and so now we just have this one image, and we can also do something else. We can say background size cover, and that'll take images that actually don't fit the full background, and it'll stretch them or shrink them or otherwise make them viable as a background image. You'll see the wider we go, the wider that image gets. And it's going to get fairly pixelated because it was never meant to be that wide. The image itself doesn't have that much image data to give us a nice sharp image. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring back an image that better suits our needs. There it is. And you'll see that since this one is already large enough, using background size cover doesn't do much for us. Let's make it wider, 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 wider. Where it does come into play is situations like this, where actually this image was not wide enough on this screen, if we had a wider screen. So let's add that back in, background size cover, and there we go. So our image, when using background images like this, especially in this cover way, you will get image chopping depending on how you style it, the specifics and the specifics of their screen. So if this was an image, maybe such as a product image, you might actually want to style this in a different way so that it always had the same height and width, or the whole image was always visible. And that'll just depend on the needs at the time. But so there we go. I know that in the other example in here, we used some different icons. We used some web icons, and we can dive into that. But without getting into that, when we use web icons, we actually have to use resources from out there on the web. We're importing other resources into our file, and that is perfectly fine. That is very normal, and most projects will import external resources. But before we do that, I just wanted us to get to this stage where we've built this entirely in one file. This is all self-contained. We could, well, that's not true. It's almost entirely self-contained. We have this place kitten image, which is external. So this is importing an external asset. And so this is almost entirely self-contained, but not quite. And if we remove that, we're back to lovely lime green. So what's nice about having a self-contained site, or nearly self-contained site, is you have less risk that your site will become broken over time. You may have seen this on any sites that become old, or even modern sites. Links can break, and this is an example where if this placekitten.com site was to change their URL, say, if they wanted to get a nice trendy .io or .ai, maybe they're doing AI on kitten images. If they change their domain to placekitten.ai, then suddenly this image would not work. Now that would be, it would be very unlikely for them to do that, because whoever is building this most likely understands that they have a lot of inbound traffic to this URL, and they wouldn't want to give up that traffic by just changing their URL. And .com is also the most in-demand URL. So this is quite a nice domain they have. They are unlikely to change it unless the company or whoever's maintaining this just takes it down. So it's unlikely to happen, but that is how websites can break, is when they link to external things, and those external things, which are not in your control, simply disappear or change. So there we are. I will show you how to use the external icons, but for now, quick break so you can write up some code, appreciate getting here, and enjoy these emoji down here. If you're wondering, you can Google for these. These are actually Unicode characters, which is why you can just copy them as text. Or maybe you probably have a keyboard on your phone that can insert these too. You can do the same on your computer, but usually just Googling around is an easier way to get these into your clipboard, and then you can just paste them into the document. And then you have these lovely, these excellent links here. All right, quick break. This is sort of an appendix because it is definitely supplementary. I'm just going to quickly show you how you can use assets that exist out in the world to get things to look a bit different. So in this case, I'm talking about icons. A lot of apps have icons in them, and there are actually a lot of icons you can get for free. So I'm going to show you one such example right now. I'm going to open a new tab, and I will say font awesome. So there is this library of icons, and I believe they're a company too. They make a ton of icons, and they have a free set. So you can come in here and navigate this UI, but that's that's hardly the point. I'm just going to show you how I already have the code that we need. So that's the example, but this is our UI that we created here in the video. So I'm going to drop some code in here that, in this case, I'm just going to drop in the code that I already have set up. We'll go down here. You may have seen, I'll look at the example again. In the example, you'll see that down here we have these icons and they're in the footer, and there's actually one up here in the header as well, but I'm just gonna ignore that for now. We're gonna make the footer look more like it does here. Let's go back. So we'll go to the footer, here we are. So I'm gonna take all of these buttons out, take them out, and I'm gonna paste in these buttons. And you're thinking, well, that looks exactly the same. That didn't help. So you'll notice, let's just look, let's zoom in. It's not easy to zoom on the editor, but here we go. Let's zoom. You'll see that we have these eyes still, these eye tags, and they have two classes applied. They have class FA, which stands for Font Awesome, and they have another class applied, which will tell it what icon to use. So we're not gonna worry about how all that works. It's free, you can use it, and they have plenty of documentation showing how to use that stuff. But I just want to show you real quick how we can use it in an existing project. So you'll figure out what icons you want, you'll create your eyes with your eye tags with the classes, and then we just need to make sure that we have the actual script to import it. So we're importing an external asset, sort of like we imported the image. We're going to, oops, mistyped. We're going to import a script up here, script. And hey, look at that. You'll see that, so this script, you can get scripts like these from their site. They will tell you exactly what value you need to put in here. For the SRC, you just make a script tag, and yeah, they'll give it to you. You can just copy it and paste it. And then you get all these icons. Look at that. So it doesn't look exactly the same as our site did. Our example here, what I did for the example was I made them a bit bigger, I put some space below them, and I'm not going to do that right here. The point is that they're in there, and given everything else in the lesson, if you've gotten this far, you should feel pretty comfortable adding a bit of spacing there. What I will do is just demonstrate real quick that what is pretty cool about these icons, and a lot of these free icons online, is that they come in the form of a font. What that means is that you can actually change the color. These aren't images like this cat, say. If we hover over, we could say change your color, right? But nothing's gonna change. The image just has the color that it has. It's an image. But these down here, we're gonna actually change the color the same way we would change text color, because it's using a font. So if we go to these buttons, footer nav button, let's go find that. Footer nav, all right. So footer nav button, actually I'm gonna do it up here, horizontal nav, and I'm gonna say horizontal nav dot button. Button, not dot button, just button, all buttons within the horizontal nav. Then I'm gonna say, well, actually, on hover. So when you hover over them, let's say color is equal to any color suggestions. Maybe we can go with, what's one I haven't used yet? Chocolate. Let's try that. And there we go. We've got some color. It's not the most beautiful color scheme, but you can see that we are getting different colors when we hover over these things. And the really key thing though is that the icon itself changes color with the text, and that is no small feat. You can't do that directly with images like this. Oops, now I'm scrolling a lot. But with icon fonts, you can, and it just makes your life very convenient if you're building buttons where you need to change states for some reason like this. Hover states are the obvious and common example, but you may find other reasons in your journeys. For now, there we are. That was the appendix. And now you know how to add external icons to a project.